Right, so today's Q This actually looks at a presentation from the former Sustainable Development Minister, James Fletcher, in St. Lucia. Now, he has highlighted the need for St. Lucia to leverage its indigenous resources to meet its national development goals. Now, why are we showing this here on Talking Point? Well, I think we believe that it is something that is applicable to every Caribbean island, including Trinidad and Tobago. The full presentation is not available in this report, but it gives a breakdown of the most pertinent points. Let's take a look at this video.
Like many small island developing states, St. Lucia is caught in a high debt, low growth, high unemployment trap, observes former Minister for Sustainable Development James Fletcher. Speaking on DBS television on Thursday evening, the Sustainable Development Advocate explored ways the country can get out of this quagmire. He highlighted a green economy scoping study done in 2016, which recommended that green tourism be acknowledged and mainstreamed by the government as a crucial part of its drive towards sustainability. As the island's economic mainstay, Fletcher pointed out that tourism must make more prudent use of scarce resources.
The tourism industry uses energy quite a bit, and moving to renewable energy using solar photovoltaic panels is another area that the tourism industry can move towards. Working with nature, not against it. Unfortunately, in all of our countries, this is Barbados, but St. Lucia is very much the same. We put our hotels right on the beach, the same places where we know will be inundated with sea level rise, with storm surges. There must be a greater symbiosis between the tourism industry and nature, because that's what the tourists come to St. Lucia for, and to many of our other islands, to see how nature, how we, the pristine beauty of our country.
Fletcher says the country must also take a radically different approach to agriculture. It is time, he says, to move on from bananas, which once contributed a significant portion to the island's GDP.
We also have to look at eco-business. If you were to go to Whole Foods in the US, Holland & Barrett in the UK, the products you see on their shelves are products, high-value products that we produce in St. Lucia. Soursop, powerful anti-carcinogen. Turmeric and ginger, powerful anti-inflammatories. Cocon coulis, that's being packaged and sold. Whole Foods, Holland & Barrett, GNC. Why are we not doing that? Why are they the ones maximizing benefit from products that we are growing?
According to Fletcher, the country needs to expand its use of renewable energy. Investing in renewable energy, he says, will increase the country's competitiveness in all sectors.
There's a strong appetite for solar panels. We should have solar panels on every public building in St. Lucia. We should be encouraging people, like Mayor Motley has said, that the sun, people do not need any permission to use what God has given to them. Make it possible without any bureaucracy for people to put solar panels on their rooftops, those who can afford it. And when we are looking at impoverished communities, the same way government puts in footpaths, put in solar panels in some of these communities and tell the people in these communities that they will never have to pay for electricity again. These are opportunities to improve people's lives.
To take advantage of the economic opportunity, he says, the country must invest heavily in its human capital. In that regard, Fletcher says the education sector must not only focus on the transmission of knowledge and facts, but also on developing critical thinking, communication, and problem-solving skills. For the DBS Newsworld, I am Zane Romulus.
Well, there you have it, and a couple of key points to take away from this. One, using your indigenous products, such as even the agricultural produce that we have, to try and supply some of the bigger chains. Although one might argue we can't even fully supply our local market, how could we supply bigger chains? The second point is, even when you take a look at our development in terms of our tourist sector, and I thought this was actually a good point, he says many of the hotels around these islands are actually based right on the beach, which isn't a good thing in terms of rising sea levels. But structurally as well, erosion is taking place everywhere you go. And the final point, which I raised yesterday morning, but I think is extremely important, is the use of, now I know you have your feelings about solar energy and wind energy.
Well, but it's not so simple, but I'll get into that.
The use of solar panels, or even as having it as part of any building code, right now, that should be something that should be implemented on every building.
Let's start there. I am not a big believer with solar farms. I do think, though, and it has been shown to be practical to have individual solar operations, whether it is for a single house or maybe even for a large building. Now, as you scale up, the economies of scale and the technical difficulties, I think, potentially becomes bigger and bigger. But battery technology for smaller scale solar power generation and storage seems to be a lot more efficient, a lot more easier than trying to do it on a wide national scale, which is why I don't like solar farms. There are even wind turbines. I'm not too sure if it's already out on the market or if it's just a prototype, but I've even seen a small wind turbine. It's an upright mechanism. It's not like a fan blade.
There's no blade, it's bladeless.
Right? Basically, the blades turn in a different, it's on a different axis, right? But the point is, it could generate significant amounts of power on a small scale as well, with a small footprint. So again, it's a rooftop situation that you're looking at. Not all rooftops would be suitable for that, but sloped rooftops are good for solar. If you have a flat rooftop, you could still mount it on something, etc., etc. I think this is something that a lot of Caribbean islands should be looking at. And honestly speaking, I would have a lot more faith because notice in the presentation, they didn't talk about another solar farm or another solar park. If we did that, I would have a lot more faith in that. To me, I feel as though the government is not really understanding the limitations or the technical limitations. They might say that they do, and they say they have technocrats and they take all of the good advice. But the way how they speak about it and their plans, it doesn't give me a lot of faith. Technology might pull them out of the quagmire, just like our war pulled them out of the oil and gas quagmire. But we can't bank on that. With regards to local production or produce that could be sold in like Whole Foods, the interesting thing is, and I think avocados is one of the best examples, right? It wasn't necessarily highly valued in the States until eventually some health food nut started to describe it.
Very recently as well.
It became a craze, right? Yeah. And then it's not just avocados, I think quinoa or a lot of other foods that used to be cheap in local markets in other nations for low income or poorer people of that nation. Well, we could afford this, it's good food, it's healthy for us, this makes up a good part of our diet. It's actually in some areas, they're being priced out of their indigenous food as it's being exported to the States. But the point is, production isn't necessarily keeping up with demand. That's why the prices goes up. So even if, yes, we can't meet all of their supply needs, but we could meet some of their supply needs.
So you can contribute.
We could contribute to that.
You can contribute to the supply chain, and one example of that was with our local cocoa and Cadbury's. I remember many years ago, cocoa farmers were complaining that the government wasn't doing enough, but there was a demand for and there still is a demand for our local cocoa here in Trinidad and Tobago, and that's just one example. I think we actually just launched.
Yes.
A chocolate factory construction is due to be completed in January. It's like just an example of what you're saying about this demand driving the price up. Flip it around. Back in the early 1920s, if I'm not mistaken, lobster was the poor man's food.
Yep.
Lobster was the poor man's food. The upper class and even the middle class didn't enjoy lobster. They didn't indulge in it. They had their thoughts about it. It was the poor man who really was living on a day-to-day wage that ate lobster. And then all of a sudden, you saw this rise in demand, and how it was cooked, how it was prepared, and then it became the food of the upper class. Now, supply of lobster cannot meet the demand for lobster, and that's why the price is so high. But it's a similar thing with avocado. It's like one of these chains in the United States started their avocado subs. And that also, when suddenly this health crave came out, that avocado is the best thing for your entire body since sliced bread.
Avocado is a go-to fatty food for a vegetarian.
Right.
That you just put it in so many different styles of cooking and types of food.
Exactly. So there is an opportunity there. Back to the point that you were making with respect to the solar panels. I used the example yesterday, and I keep asking, I would like to be correct on this. I'd like to think that I'm wrong. This new Ministry of Health headquarters, which I'm sure you've seen around the Queen's Park Savannah, it's absolutely beautiful, looks amazing, huge, like a hotel. Headquarters, astounding. Do they have solar panels as part? Because if we're having solar farms, We want to reduce our dependence on natural gas for energy here in Transvago. We want to, try and utilize it more for export purposes. In terms of all these buildings, why aren't new building codes? Why aren't there new building codes that suggest that
there's a cynical reason why.
New buildings.
There's a cynical reason why.
Well, we get into that, but new buildings, all new buildings that are being constructed or renovated should have solar panels
Well, there's two
on their
cynical
roof.
reasons.
Right?
The first cynical reason is because private investors don't want to pay the expense, right? Why do I have to? Because solar panels are upfront capital costs. Electricity is an ongoing cost that the tenants will probably have to pay. Why do I have to bear that cost for? So the government is not going to want to do that because some of their finances are in the construction industry. That's point number one. Point number two, I am not going to get a photo opportunity if you put solar panels on your house. More importantly, and I'm not saying BP and Shell are involved in this sort of behavior, but I can't remember if it was you, Karen, who had the point, well, why did it hold up for so long? Maybe somebody was involved in this kind of behavior. I can't award new contracts if you're putting solar panels up on your house. I could award new contracts if we're making a solar farm. And new contracts as opportunities to enrich myself.
Put it this way. The government were distributing light bulbs to its customers. I think they're still distributing light bulbs. And one rumor that was circulating suggested that it is actually one of their financiers that is supplying the light bulbs. So the government are purchasing it as a way of paying back, right?
It sounds like one of those like kid shows when the evil government does something kind of silly.
But in all fairness, if I'm not mistaken, I think the government has removed taxes on solar items. I could be wrong. I think they have. My thing is a lot more needs to be done than just that. You need to promote, you need to advocate. But they will start doing this as soon as one of their financiers become the distributors here,
exactly.
Distributor here in Transvago.
It goes back to when we were talking about a similar thing with regards to grants and developing the industry, and you said, well, we have that for agriculture, but I'm like, well, yeah, but it's not really translating. And I think it's the same thing. We could have the grants, right? And it's almost like if they're doing it because, well, we kind of have to do it, so we make it available. But do we really care about it? No. Because we're not pushing it, we're not promoting it, we're not having speeches about you should do your part. Now, granted, I will still applaud the Prime Minister for saying that they will be willing to actually pay people for putting power onto the grid. I don't know how easy or practical that is, but the thought is very commendable, and I have to applaud that. That said, I'm not really seeing, outside of that decision, any sort of real innovation to say that I care about this, I'm putting my best foot forward, I'm thinking this through, I'm putting effort into this. That one thing, though, that was pretty good, but it might amount to nothing anyway, so.
Forward never, backward ever. We'll take a break here on Talking Point.